Did you know that one man stood before the most powerful empire in history and refused to bow? That a Roman soldier sworn to protect the emperor chose instead to protect the persecuted? Saint Sebastian didn't just defy an empire with words. He survived execution, rose from near death, and returned to face his persecutors once more. How does a man find the courage to stand against impossible odds, not once, but twice? What would you choose? Safety or truth? This is the story of Saint Sebastian, the soldier who turned his sword into a shield for the innocent. And if you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between comfort and conviction, hit that like button and subscribe. This story is for you. In the golden age of Rome, when legions marched across continents and emperors commanded the destiny of nations, Sebastian was born into a world of marble and steel. The year was around 256 AD. The empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to the Black Sea. Sebastian's father was a man of Gaul. His mother came from Milan. They were respectable citizens, the kind of family that formed the backbone of the empire. From his earliest memories, Sebastian heard the clatter of hooves on stone streets, the sharp commands of centurions, the measured tramp of soldiers keeping the peace. The boy grew tall and strong. His eyes seemed to see beyond the horizon. As a young man, Sebastian embodied everything Rome valued: courage, discipline, loyalty, and an unwavering sense of duty. When he came of age, the legions called. Sebastian answered. He enlisted in the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite personal army. Only the best were chosen for this honor. To wear the purple cloak of the Praetorian was to taste power itself. Yet with each passing day, in the gleaming halls of the palace, he felt a growing hunger, a hunger for something real. The empire's treatment of Christians troubled him deeply. These were not rebels or criminals. They were ordinary people whose only crime was refusing to burn incense to gods of stone. He watched families torn apart, saw children orphaned, witnessed good men and women fed to beasts for entertainment. And slowly, quietly, a fire began to burn in his heart. Not the fire of rebellion, but of righteousness. Would you have the courage to question everything you were raised to believe? To risk everything for people you barely knew? In the bustling streets of Rome, beneath the surface of imperial grandeur, a hidden community thrived. They met in homes and catacombs, sharing bread and wine in memory of their risen Lord. Sebastian found them, or perhaps they found him. The moment of his conversion came quietly. He was walking through the forum when he saw an old priest being dragged toward prison. The man's face was bloodied, his clothes torn, but his eyes blazed with an inner light. As their gazes met across the crowd, the priest smiled, not with bitterness or fear, but with joy. That night, Sebastian could not sleep. He sought out the Christian community. In a small room lit by oil lamps, he heard the gospel for the first time. The words fell on his heart like rain on parched earth. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. His baptism took place in secret, in the darkness before dawn. As he rose from the water, Sebastian felt like a new man. The empire still commanded his body, but his soul belonged to a different kingdom now. Sebastian began using his position to serve the persecuted. He would warn Christian families of impending raids, help prisoners escape. By day, he stood at attention. By night, he moved through the city like an angel of mercy. His reputation among the Christians grew quietly. They called him the guardian angel. Few knew his real name or position. A bridge between two worlds. A protector of the innocent. But how long can you live a double life before someone notices? How long before the walls start closing in? Sebastian's network of protection had grown so effective that it drew unwanted attention. Chromatius, the prefect of Rome, was no ordinary official. He was intelligent, ruthless, and utterly dedicated to rooting out what he saw as the Christian threat to Roman order. Chromatius began to notice patterns. Too many failed raids, too many empty safe houses, too many prisoners who seemed to have advance warning. Someone was feeding information to the Christians, someone with access to official secrets. The crisis came when a young Christian named Tiberius was arrested. Under torture, he revealed details about the underground network, details that could only have come from someone inside. Chromatius knew he had found his thread, and he began pulling it with methodical precision. Sebastian faced an impossible choice. He could flee, disappear into the vast anonymity of the empire's provinces. Many in the Christian community begged him to do exactly that. But flight would mean abandoning those who depended on him, leaving them defenseless against the coming storm. Instead, Sebastian made a decision that would echo through history. He would confront the emperor himself. The plan was audacious beyond measure. Sebastian would use his position to gain a private audience with Diocletian, then reveal his faith and challenge the emperor to end the persecution. It was almost certainly suicide, but it was the kind of witness that could change everything. What would you do? Choose safety and abandon your calling? Or step into the fire and trust God with the outcome? The moment came with the rising sun. Standing before the most powerful man on earth, Sebastian threw back his shoulders. He spoke words that shattered the morning calm. "Caesar, I am a Christian. I serve a king greater than any earthly ruler, and I can no longer stand silent while his people suffer for speaking truth." The imperial court erupted in chaos. Guards who had served alongside Sebastian for years stared in shock and disbelief. Courtiers whispered furiously among themselves. Some fled the chamber entirely. Diocletian rose from his throne. His face was a mask of imperial fury. This was not just defiance. It was betrayal of the deepest kind. "You dare? You who have worn the purple, who have sworn by the gods of Rome, you dare to throw it all away for the fantasies of slaves and criminals?" Sebastian stood unmoved. The fear that had gripped him during the approach was gone now. "I have served Rome faithfully, Caesar, but I have discovered that there are things more precious than empire, more lasting than marble and gold. I have found a truth worth dying for." The interrogation that followed was unlike anything the court had ever witnessed. Instead of groveling pleas for mercy, Sebastian answered each question with quiet dignity. When offered wealth, position, and pardon for his madness, he simply shook his head. Finally, Diocletian pronounced his judgment. Sebastian would be taken to the Campus Martius. There he would be shot full of arrows until dead. It was a soldier's death, but it would be public and degrading. A warning to any others who might harbor similar thoughts of betrayal. Could you stand before ultimate earthly power and choose truth over life itself? The Campus Martius stretched before them under the Roman sun. Word had spread through the city with the speed of wildfire. A Praetorian guard had declared himself a Christian. The emperor's own trusted soldier had betrayed everything sacred to Rome. Crowds gathered as Sebastian was marched from the palace. Some jeered, others watched in stunned silence. Among the crowd were Christians he had once protected, watching their guardian led to death. At the execution ground, a sturdy oak tree had been chosen. Its trunk was scarred from years of training exercises. Sebastian was stripped of his purple cloak, bound to the tree with thick ropes. The execution detail consisted of his own former comrades, men who had served with him, trained with him, shared meals, and the brotherhood of the guard. Their faces were grim behind their helmets. Orders were orders. But this felt like a violation of something sacred. As the archers took their positions, Sebastian raised his voice one final time, not in a plea for mercy, but in a prayer that carried across the field. "Lord Jesus Christ, into your hands I commend my spirit. Let my death be a seed that brings forth life. Let my blood water the ground where your church will grow." The centurion raised his hand. The archers drew their bows. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the only sound was the creaking of bowstrings. Then came the command, "Loose." Arrows flew like deadly birds. They struck with soft thuds that echoed across the field. 1, 2, 10, 20. Sebastian's body jerked with each impact. But he remained upright, held by the ropes, and by something else, something that defied understanding. When the volley ended, Sebastian hung motionless, his body bristling with arrows like a porcupine of death. Blood ran down the tree trunk and pooled in the dust below. The crowd began to disperse, some satisfied that justice had been served, others troubled by what they had witnessed. But what happened next would astonish even his enemies. Among those who remained was a woman named Irene, a Christian widow who had been helped by Sebastian in her time of need. As darkness fell and the field emptied, she crept forward with her servants. She intended to claim the body for proper burial. What she found defied every expectation. Sebastian was alive. Barely, impossibly, miraculously alive. The arrows had missed every vital organ. It was as if an invisible hand had guided each arrow away from its target. Working quickly and quietly, Irene and her servants cut Sebastian down. They carried him to her house. There, by lamplight, they removed the arrows and bound his wounds. For days, Sebastian hovered between life and death. His survival seemed impossible by every standard of the time. Yet somehow, life clung to his battered frame. As strength slowly returned to his body, Sebastian faced a choice that would define his legacy. He could remain hidden, perhaps flee Rome entirely, live out his days in quiet obscurity. But Sebastian felt called to something more audacious. He would return to confront Diocletian once again, not as a condemned criminal, but as a living witness to the power of God. Irene and the other Christians were horrified. "You've been given a second chance at life. Don't throw it away." But Sebastian's resolve was unshakable. He had learned something in those moments between the arrows and the tree. Something about the nature of witness and the meaning of resurrection. Would you take the miracle and run, or see it as a call to an even greater witness? After weeks of recovery, Sebastian was strong enough to walk. Though his body bore permanent scars, each mark a reminder of divine providence. He prepared for his final mission with the care of a soldier readying for battle. The plan was simple in its audacity. Sebastian would present himself at the temple of Castor and Pollux. When Diocletian appeared, resplendent in his ceremonial robes, Sebastian stepped forward into the light. The effect was electric. Courtiers gasped, guards reached for their weapons, and the emperor himself stopped dead in his tracks. His face draining of color as if he had seen a ghost, which, in a very real sense, he had. "Impossible. You were dead. I saw you die. My archers put 20 arrows in your body." Sebastian smiled, not with triumph, but with the gentle sadness of one who had seen beyond the veil of mortal concerns. "I was dead, Caesar, but my God is stronger than death. He has raised me up to speak truth to you once more, not in vengeance, but in love." The assembled crowd pressed closer, torn between fascination and terror. Here was a man who had been publicly executed, standing alive before the most powerful ruler on earth. "Caesar, you have persecuted the innocent, killed the righteous, set yourself up as judge over matters that belong to God alone, but even now, it is not too late. The same God who spared my life offers mercy to you." For a moment, those watching held their breath. Could the emperor be moved? But the moment passed. Diocletian's expression hardened into the mask of imperial authority. "If you have returned from death, then you can return to death again. This time, I will make certain there is no resurrection." He turned to his guards with a voice like winter wind. "Beat him to death with clubs. Do not stop until his bones are powder and his blood soaks the stones." In our world of comfort and compromise, can you imagine choosing conviction over life itself? Not once, but twice? The beating continued with methodical brutality. Unlike the almost ceremonial nature of the arrow execution, this was raw, ugly violence, designed to obliterate not just life, but hope itself. Yet even as his body failed, something remarkable was happening among the witnesses. The excess of violence was turning the crowd against the emperor. Romans were accustomed to death in the arena, but this felt different. This was the destruction of a man whose only crime was refusing to deny his faith. Some in the crowd began to weep openly. Others turned away, unable to watch. A few guards struck with less force than ordered. When Sebastian finally fell silent, his body broken and still, Diocletian ordered his corpse to be thrown into the great sewer of Rome. It was a final insult, designed to deny him even the dignity of burial. But the emperor underestimated the network of believers Sebastian had protected and inspired. Through coordinated moves, Sebastian's remains were intercepted, spirited away to the catacombs. In the days following Sebastian's death, something unexpected began to happen throughout the empire. The story of the soldier who faced death twice created ripples that grew into waves of conversion. The Praetorian Guard found itself quietly divided. Some who had served with Sebastian began asking questions about the faith that gave him such extraordinary courage. The Christian community was transformed. Sebastian's sacrifice became a new model of martyrdom. Active, chosen, unshakable. His example inspired countless others to step forward and declare their faith, even in the face of certain persecution. But here's what might surprise you most about Sebastian's legacy. Within a generation of Sebastian's death, the impossible had happened. Constantine legalized Christianity and embraced it himself. In the year 313 AD, the Edict of Milan granted religious freedom throughout the empire, ending the age of persecution. Historians point to many factors: political convenience, military necessity, the growing influence of Christian populations. But those who remembered Sebastian's story knew something deeper was at work. The seed of witness planted with his blood had grown into a tree that overshadowed the empire itself. Sebastian was officially recognized as a saint by the early church. His feast day, the 20th of January. Soldiers in particular adopted him as their patron, a model of how to serve earthly authorities while remaining faithful to higher principles. The church built over his tomb became one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Christendom. Medieval knights invoked Sebastian's name before battle. Renaissance artists saw in his story the struggle between spiritual and worldly power. Modern believers see in him a patron for all who must choose between popularity and conviction. But perhaps Sebastian's greatest legacy was the example he set for ordinary believers facing extraordinary circumstances. The Roman Empire crumbled into dust, but the faith Sebastian died protecting continues to flourish. Emperors are remembered as footnotes to history, but the soldier who defied them is honored as a saint. What does Sebastian's courage teach us about our own moments of choice? Today, nearly 2,000 years after his death, Saint Sebastian remains one of Christianity's most beloved and recognizable saints. His image, bound to a tree, pierced with arrows, yet radiating peace, has inspired countless believers to find courage in their own trials. Athletes have adopted him as their patron. Those facing illness invoke his protection. Soldiers continue to wear his medal into battle. The city of Rome honors him with San Sebastiano fuori le mura, built over the catacomb where his body was first laid to rest. Pilgrims from around the world still come to pray in that sacred place. But Sebastian's most profound legacy may be the simple truth his life embodied. Ordinary people, faced with extraordinary choices, can achieve extraordinary things when they trust in something greater than themselves. He was not born a hero, did not seek martyrdom. Yet when the moment came to choose between comfort and conviction, he chose conviction. In our own age, when believers still face persecution, Sebastian's example continues to inspire. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing truth while afraid. Sebastian stood against an empire, and his blood became a seed of faith. His arrows became his crown, his silence became his witness, and his death became his victory. Remember this: kingdoms fall, emperors vanish, but the courage of a single soul can echo for centuries. Saint Sebastian still whispers to us, some truths are worth living for, and some are worth dying for.